The restaurant was buzzing with quiet elegance, the kind of place where every glass gleamed, every chandelier sparkled, and every whispered conversation was about power, money, and influence. The polished marble floors reflected the sharp clicks of expensive shoes, and in the corner, a group of executives laughed a little too loudly, but the laughter stopped when a sharp voice cut through the room. "Don't touch me, you stupid girl." The words hung heavy in the air, poisonous and humiliating. Heads turned. Silence spread like wildfire across the tables. At the center of it sat Richard Callahan, a billionaire CEO whose empire stretched across half the globe. Tall, broad-shouldered, with slick-back hair, in a tailored navy suit. He carried himself like the world owed him obedience. On the other side stood Maya, a young waitress balancing a tray of appetizers, her red uniform crisp but plain against the grandeur of the room. Her eyes flickered with pain, though she kept her voice steady. "I was only serving you, sir," she said softly, her words almost swallowed by the silence. Richard sneered, leaning back in his chair. "Then learn how to serve properly. Some of us don't have time for mistakes." The tension was unbearable. Some diners shifted uncomfortably, but none dared intervene. After all, this was Richard Callahan, the billionaire whose next deal was rumored to be worth $3.5 billion, one of the biggest mergers in the industry. His arrogance seemed untouchable. But arrogance has a way of blinding even the smartest men. Maya turned to walk away, holding her tray steady despite the sting of humiliation. She didn't cry, didn't argue, didn't even flinch. She simply walked with quiet dignity back to the service station. But what no one knew, not even Richard, was that Maya wasn't just a waitress. She was the daughter of Daniel Hayes, the very man Richard was trying to impress that evening. Daniel was a billionaire investor, older and wiser, who believed deeply in respect and humility. He had come to observe Richard, to see if this was a man worthy of trust. Daniel had been sitting quietly at a nearby table, his identity unnoticed by most, watching the scene unfold. His gaze stayed not on Richard, but on Maya, his daughter, whose calm under pressure spoke louder than any words. The evening carried on, but the air had shifted. Richard boasted loudly about profits and expansion, laughing too harshly at his own jokes, completely unaware that he had already lost something greater than money. Finally, Daniel rose from his seat. The room went still. Everyone knew who he was, the man whose signature could move markets, whose decisions shaped industries. Richard straightened up instantly, his smug grin returning. "Daniel," Richard greeted, his voice syrupy with fake warmth. "I was hoping to speak with you tonight about the merger. I think you'll find it's the perfect opportunity." Daniel's expression was unreadable. He glanced at Maya, who stood quietly in the corner, then turned back to Richard. "You know," Daniel said slowly, his voice deep and calm, "I've built my career on numbers. But more than numbers, I've built it on people. Because without respect, numbers mean nothing." Richard chuckled nervously. Of course, of course. Respect is important." Daniel's eyes hardened. "Strange, then, that you couldn't offer even the smallest shred of respect to the woman serving your meal tonight." A murmur swept across the restaurant. Richard's face drained of color. He glanced toward Maya, suddenly realizing who she was. But it was too late. Daniel continued, his voice carrying the weight of finality. "If you cannot respect the people you consider beneath you, how could I ever trust you with those beside you? Our deal is off, effective immediately." The room gasped. Millions of dollars didn't just disappear. Billions did. In that instant, Richard's empire began to crumble. Richard stammered, his words tumbling over each other. "Daniel, please, this is a misunderstanding. She's just what?" Daniel cut him off, his voice sharp as steel. "Just a waitress? Just a human being? That's where you fail, Richard. And that's why you will lose." The silence was deafening. Richard sank back into his chair, his arrogance stripped away, his empire slipping through his fingers faster than he could grasp. And Maya? She didn't gloat, didn't smirk, didn't revel in his downfall. She simply placed her tray down, straightened her shoulders, and walked past him with quiet grace. the same quiet strength that had impressed her father all along. By the end of the night, word of the canceled deal had already begun to spread across boardrooms and news outlets. A $3.5 billion empire lost, not because of numbers, but because of character. Daniel walked out of the restaurant with Maya by his side. "You carried yourself with dignity," he told her softly. "That speaks louder than wealth ever will." Maya smiled faintly, the hurt still lingering but softened by pride. For in that single evening, she had reminded everyone, including her father, that respect is the real currency of power. And as for Richard Callahan, the arrogant billionaire who thought himself untouchable, he learned the hard way that money can buy many things: tables at the finest restaurants, suits stitched with gold thread, even headlines filled with his name. But it could never buy the one thing he lost that night: respect. Sometimes the loudest people carry the smallest truths, and sometimes the quietest people teach the greatest lessons. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share where you're watching from.